Okay, I think we're just about ready to start. So hello, everybody, and welcome to the 2021 State of Digital Transformation webinar presented by Profit and Altimeter. My name is Omar Akhtar. I'm the Research Director of Altimeter, which is the digital research arm and advisory group within Profit. I'm joined here by Chan Su, the Senior Partner and Chief of all things digital at Profit, which is a transformation consultancy based in a few areas here and all over the world. Hi, Chan. Thanks for joining me
Hi,
today.
hi, Omar. Thanks.
Great. So as you mentioned, Chan, the term digital transformation is loaded. Maybe it's something that's been done to death. Maybe people are tired of talking about it. What do you think is it about digital transformation this year that we can still say that they haven't heard before?
I think this is the year when digital transformation became inevitable. I think that there were two kinds of reactions to this idea of digital transformation. One was, okay, let me try that, and I'll try whatever I can, wherever I can. The other was, okay, fine. If I wait long enough, this tool will go away. And then I can go back to what I was always doing. And I think this year, especially with the advent of COVID and this sort of upside down, topsy-turvy world we're living in, made digital transformation not a choice, but a requirement in our lives. Not just as business improvement, but really about life improvement or having the possibility of conducting a life through these times.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's such a great point is transformations happen to us whether we liked it or not. And there's a ton of data that we're going to dig into to tell you exactly how that played out. And just as a reminder for everybody, if you've got questions, you can put them right in the chat or you can put them in the Q&A and we'll try to answer them as we go. We'll also reserve some time right at the end for a more in-depth discussion and conversation if that's what you'd like, but we'd like to keep this a free-flowing conversation. We'd love to see your reactions and we'll have a few interactive questions to understand some of the motivations of this group and some of your thinking and see how that compares to our broader survey. So just to give you an idea of what the state of digital transformation is, this is a report that Altimeter has been doing since 2014, since the term digital transformation first became a thing, where we decided that there was enough digital disruption happening that companies needed to make larger wholesale changes to the way that they did business than maybe just updating their IT. And so we've done that report every year. We've been tracking the changes every year since then. And this is the first year where we decided that we were going to take a bit of a retrospective look to see what worked, what didn't work, what separated the people who had successful transformation versus those that had really average results. And so for the first time, we were able to see really key differences between those two types of companies. A few logistical questions about how the survey was deployed. We deployed it in July to August of 2021, and it was looking at respondents from companies of 1,000 plus employees. 587 total respondents in the US, UK, France, Germany, and China. And we also had quotas in a few different industries: retail, manufacturing, finance and insurance, healthcare, and technology. And so what we try to do with this report is a few things. We tried to look at, as I mentioned before, what worked and what didn't. And more importantly, we tried to see some indicators of what is coming down the road. What's the next phase of transformation going to look like? And so it's not enough for us to say that these are the things you should be doing now. It's really about what do you need to prepare for the next couple of years. So before we get started, we're going to put up a poll question just to help us understand what were some of the motivations behind this group. We've asked, and I think we're going to have a poll question coming up right about now, where we're going to ask you, what was the reason that your company invested in digital transformation? There's a few different choices here: competing with newer businesses, staying relevant, updating technology. Really pick the one that speaks most to you in terms of what was the first impetus towards transforming. And we'll see how that compares with the results that we have with the broader survey. Okay, we're going to give everyone a few more seconds to vote. I keep forgetting I can't vote. I have such an instinct to click on radio buttons when I see them.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same thing.
I think we can see the results. All right, so it looks like the winner is increased core business growth. That's really great to see. And I think that that really leads into our first key point of discussion, which is why should companies transform in the first place? And so we found a couple of things. We found that broadly speaking, companies needed to transform in service of innovation, which is innovating new products, services, business models. And then we found a really big difference between the companies that said they had successful transformations and companies that had average transformations. We found that companies that had successful transformations were much more likely to do it in service of business growth compared to those that had average transformation results, who are much more likely to focus on things like reducing operating costs or replacing outdated or obsolete technology. So this group here looks like you all are pretty successful. Chan, is that an encouraging sign to see?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think we can't get away from the fact that we all have responsibilities to the business that we're working in. There was a period, I think a good 10 years or so, when everyone was sort of, tended to think about wild new ideas as they saw digital natives pop up here and there. But I do think that when all of the chips are counted, we need to figure out how to better the business that we are in. It doesn't mean doing the same thing over and over, but it does mean that we need to focus on what we have to take care of. So I see that. I definitely see that as a strong sort of contender.
And what would you say to a chief technical officer, or chief information, or CIO who would come in and say that, look, updating technology is the only way we're going to drive real transformation. It's all about moving to cloud, moving to new innovative products. That's what transformation means. And certainly we've got enough respondents in the survey who still think that's what transformation means.
Well, I think it's true for them, right? I think it's their job to take care of the technology. So I would not sort of denigrate that thinking at all. What I would say is that it's incomplete because you have built yourself a great sort of technology powerhouse that really doesn't tend to function to lead to a business goal. And that's not because people are bad at what they're doing. It's just because it's an incomplete picture. What we're finding after, 20, 25 years of digital transformation is that all of it is required. So, and I think what we're finding here also is that transformation for a reason, for a goal, transformation in order to drive growth is better than transformation because we need to transform.
Absolutely. That, having that clear business goal streamlines so many decisions and helps make so many efficient cost purchases, because you're doing everything in service of a very specific goal that multiple functions can get behind, rather than the specific goal of any one function at any time, which is certainly the way that a lot of companies have approached their transformation in the past. So that finding was really encouraging to us, and it validates a lot of the thinking that we've been trying to tell the market about how to approach a transformation. The other one, I think this is a big finding that we've seen that's really articulating a big difference. In the past, when we've asked companies, how have you implemented a digital transformation program? We've given them a few options. Is it an incubated way to do it, which is where you transform one company and then you scale those learnings to you transform one department and you scale those learnings to different functions? Or do you do it in an isolated way where you tell all the departments to transform on their own and you don't really coordinate? Or is it a holistic way where every department is transforming according to a single coordinated plan and single coordinated vision? And then, of course, there's the ad hoc approach, which is a free-for-all. Everyone kind of do what you want. We'll see where we end up. The encouraging thing is that very few companies are doing the ad hoc approach, but the vast majority of companies, whether they were successful in their transformation or not, were adopting this purple effort of being holistic. And so what we're seeing over here is that most companies are trying to take everybody along in a converged approach to transformation. That means that you can't really do one department at a time anymore. The disruption curve is so steep, you can't wait to scale changing in only one department. You have to bring them all together. Now, what I would imagine, Chan, that's going to cause even more headaches for executives that are trying to do this in any meaningful way.
Yeah, I think so. Look, I think we spent 15 years trying to do it wherever, like let a thousand flowers bloom, I think is the expression. I think that was seen as innovative and wild and agile and all of those buzzwords. And I think those things have yielded really good fruit, and that is learnings as well as some successes. It's not time to put those learnings to use. Think of it the last 20 years as a multi-trillion-dollar investment on figuring out how to do digital transformation better. And what we're finding, both from our research and from our work in the market, is that a convergent approach is a better approach than a disparate approach if you want to make forward momentum, forward progress for business goal. And by that, what I mean also is it's not necessarily that everything has to be sort of very, very granularly specced out so that everybody's sort of marching. It does mean that people need to have some clarity around why are we doing this? What are we going to know is when will we recognize success? And what are the first, second, third, fourth things that we need to do together? Those are very straightforward rules, I think, that's leading to this phenomenon of converged approach.
If you know you've got so much experience with advising clients on really taking the first steps for this converged approach, what are some of the easy things that they can do to wrap their heads around transforming everyone at the same time?
I think the easiest thing is to read or go to a webinar. To actually do this is not easy, I would say. Let's just be straightforward. It's not easy for anyone, whether it's an incumbent company or even a digital native. It's just not easy to transform, to evolve. So if we can get that sort of agreed by everyone, that there is no shortcut to transformation, then I think we can begin to make progress. That is, try to understand what is happening in your enterprise, why it's happening, and then figure out whether that should be happening or not. Then I think we put the investments on where you want the progress to accelerate. We are not advocates of multi-year planning. We are advocates of planning, doing, assessing, and planning again. That iterative approach, I think, is the best way for us to deal with a changing world, because the technology landscape, as well as the social economic landscape in the world right now, is changing so rapidly that I just don't think that we can freeze our thinking and try to execute it for years, if even months.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think when we did some research, and we don't have that in this presentation, but if you read the whole report, you'll find when we asked companies how long they'd been in digital transformation, it wasn't very long. The most successful companies had been doing it for 4 years, and majority of companies were really only 2 years into a formal digital transformation program. So as you said, it doesn't make sense to do a ton of multi-year planning when A, disruptions happen so quickly, and B, you have to have time to assess. I'm so glad you said that, because up until now, there was no real mechanism for assessing and proceeding and assessing and proceeding, because a lot of people didn't have benchmarks. But now we actually have benchmarks about what good looks like, and it's really up to companies to use that.
Yeah, and I know that you go into this a little bit later too, but I think we've also now gotten the ability to get the data. Obtain the data, understand the data, and use the data, which we didn't really in the early days of digital transformation. It was really more like build and pray and actually observe and iterate.
Absolutely. No, that's a great point. And successful companies do have the data, and more importantly, they know how to use it. So we're going to take a pause here for a minute for another poll question, and love to understand within your company, which executive is most likely to own or sponsor the digital transformation initiative. Now, again, we've seen this change wildly in the years that we've been doing this, and this year for the first time we've had a really interesting result. So would love to understand where this group lands. So we'll do that for maybe 20, 30 seconds or so. The CDO is in there, Chan. Are you feeling a little threatened?
I said this many years ago. I think that the CDO honestly is an expiring, or I should say, so with a built-in obsolescence feature
Mhm.
among titles in that alphabet soup of C titles.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Necessary for its time. I think they're expanding that role and vision now. So interesting. Again, I think this group is definitely part of the more mature part of the curve, because as you can see, the majority are using are tasking digital transformation initiatives with the CEO. And we've got the CIO at 17% and then the CMO at 13%. So I think that tells us two things. It tells us that this idea of digital transformation going to the CEO is increasingly common. And voila, we're seeing that in overall, while the CIO and CTO is most likely to be tasked with transformation, when we teased out the difference between successful companies and the not so successful companies, by far the CEO was the most popular leader to own or sponsor a digital transformation. So that's consistent with the results of this group. And I think that's really encouraging to see. What's different from this group is that maybe the CMO isn't quite as the respondents didn't choose the CMO at quite the same level as this group did, all the way down there at 4%, 5%. So a couple of important things to make here. It's really encouraging that the CEO is taking this on. This certainly wasn't the key, something that we've seen in the past few times that we've done this research. And B, it also shows us that it's, transforming in service of a business goal is key, and that business goal and vision has to come from the CEO. They're the ones that have the credibility and the resources to define that vision, even if they're not per se driving the transformation initiatives themselves. That has to be done by different components.
Omar, I also draw this conclusion that it's funny, the more we talk about technology and digital, the more we run into human beings.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for us to understand that the CEOs are not necessarily better than the CIOs, CTOs, and the CMOs at doing digital transformation. But I think the CEO's unique sort of advantage is being able to see across the enterprise. Mm-hmm. If there's anything we've learned over the 20 some odd years of doing digital transformation, it's that it is a wholesale transformation. It cannot be done in hotspots and hope that it spreads on its own. And I think that over the last, 5 years or so, companies are really beginning to take that lesson to heart. So the CEOs have always said, yeah, let's do that. But I think this is the time when we're seeing a shift towards accountability. Accountability for CEOs. Does that mean that the CEO does everything? Absolutely not. It's critical to have the right CIO, CMO, and others. So I think we're seeing a shift from digital transformation being a nice to have or a good item in the quarterly earnings call to, oh, this is really something that we have to do. That also, I think, is a factor of our changing lifestyle in terms of how we work. If you do not know how to run your company digitally, you're kind of sunk right now. Mm-hmm. And that rises to the level of, you can see down here on the fourth item, board of directors and the CEO. In a way, I think that it hasn't before. It really hits hard.
Yeah. And how would you react to maybe a diminishing role of the CMO? In the past times, and certainly anecdotally, we all thought that CMOs were going to be at the head of transformation, especially given how much CMOs were doing in the realms of data and content and customer experience. We're seeing that role not quite playing as big a part in wider transformation objectives.
So what I'm seeing when we engage with clients is a bifurcation among CMOs. There are CMOs who have very able-bodied colleagues like CIOs and chief data officers and others who can give that person, the CMO, all of the ammunition, all of the tools and data they need in order to do the marketing right. So what I'm seeing is on one side, like the people who are fortunate enough to have that, and therefore they do not need to lead an enterprise-wide transformation. After all, that is not the usual job description for a CMO, right?
Yes.
So to me, that's a logical sort of retrenching or reestablishment of the CMO in the firmly the marketing lane. I think that should be a boon to CMOs because after all, they do have this other thing they have to worry about, which is the marketing and sales of the company's products and services, which is enabled by digital transformation, but that's not their sort of point of entry. So I see that as a very sort of a fortunate development. The other part is that although we look at these in a relative sense, what I would say is that the job of the CMO has not gotten any smaller or any easier. So it might be maybe that it's in the smaller percentage of these companies, but it's gotten really complicated.
Mhm.
And the CMOs have more to do today in order to transform their own areas than they ever had before. So I guess in summary, when you talk about enterprise transformation, it makes sense that the CMOs are not as involved as, say, the CEO, for example, right? But when it comes to marketing transformation, boy, the CMOs have a huge hill to climb, and they need to do a lot.
They do need to do a lot. And to their credit, they have done a lot. I think one thing that we're seeing in some of the results that we saw is that marketing transformation has actually progressed pretty well. And we're having to reset our benchmarks for how we look at what mature marketing looks like because of the great improvements that CMOs have made in their own departments. They're doing better personalization, better real-time digital experiences, presence on new channels. There's a lot that CMOs are doing well that other parts of the company can learn from. Would love to hear in the comments what the experiences have been at your company. Was there a formal shift from one executive to another? Has it always been the CEO in charge? Would love to hear what some of those conversations sound like in the comments. So when we asked our companies about what they prioritize first, I think with this question, we were trying to tease out, were there any key differences in the approach that successful companies took versus the one that average companies took? Were there any initiatives that they prioritized first compared to others? And we found there was a few differences, not huge differences, but enough to be significant. So while overall, modernizing IT and improving operational agility tended to be the first thing that companies focused on. No surprises there. That's usually the place most companies start, is by upgrading their technology, and that'll continue to be the case. We found a few differences in successful versus average companies. One being that successful companies were more likely to prioritize employee experiences and customer experiences in their transformation objectives. And of course, with the COVID-19 pandemic, customer experience and employee experience has been brought to the forefront even more than it has before. So you can see the companies that made early investments there, those have paid off. And the second thing is that successful companies were much better at investing in data management. So procuring, not just capturing data, but procuring, storing, managing data from multiple sources to do many different use cases. So whether that's new products, insights, analytics, whatever it might be, successful companies were much more likely to prioritize those. So given that, Chan, would that still be something you would tell a company that's had average results, or would you maybe change some of their priorities at this point in time?
I would say that they need to add employee experience, and I think that's what we're seeing here. People are emphasizing employee experience because that is a new entry into the experience concerns, right? The list of things that we need to worry about. I would say that you cannot let up on the customer experience. And in fact, you really, companies don't really have a choice anymore about prioritizing one over the other. That human factor is kicking in. And we now see that digital transformation is an enabling agent for both employee experience and customer experience.
Absolutely. And when we think about customer experience, I think a lot of our respondents, as well as people that are tuning into this webinar, will know what that looks like, a great customer experience. But I've heard very varying definitions of what a great employee experience looks like. Some people might say that that's just great collaboration tools. But for others, it goes a bit more than that. And I'm wondering, what are some of the key principles that you might take from customer experience that you would apply to employee experience?
Well, I think the usual sort of human factors and human-centered design aspects of an experience are sort of consistent across customers and employees. I also think that it's easy to say that, but it is extremely difficult to take 40, 50, 60 years of machine-based task management is what we call employee tools, and turn them into much more of a human factor design entities and experiences. It's a lot to fix.
Yeah.
Okay. And so it's a lot of work to be done there. But I think that but the pathway actually is very clear. If we design our employee experiences for the same level of simplicity, efficiency, and effectiveness as we do for customers, we'll be fine.
Absolutely. It really all comes down to solving problems and identifying needs. And we're doing that for our customers. We can absolutely do that for our employees. So in terms of obstacles, so we asked companies, what was the biggest challenge that you came up against in your digital transformation efforts? So no surprises in terms of the top challenge. COVID-19 created other priorities or cut the budget. Interesting to note, we don't. One of the stats in the report is that even though COVID-19 created other priorities or cut the budget, that didn't stop the acceleration of a lot of transformation programs. So in essence, what companies had to do was more with less. So they couldn't afford to slow down transformation efforts given the customer experience needs and employee experience needs, and the pandemic certainly accelerated those. But they certainly, had their hands tied behind their backs for a lot of things, and maybe didn't have quite the resources at hand that they might have had in past years. Budget continued to be a problem. Digital transformation often is viewed as a cost center. But interestingly enough, number 3, there's still a fair amount of people that cited resistance to change, which is politics, sabotage, fear, all those scary words that really make it difficult to implement new processes or take up new thinking. Now that's a really human-centered problem, and I'm wondering if there's any, are there any hard-coded best practices to tackle that, or is that simply a matter of just letting the tide wash over?
So change management will kick this up. This isn't actually unique to digital transformation. This is actually consistent with all transformation. In fact, all, large scale change.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is for transformation until we start to move their cheese. Right.
Yeah.
So I think this is a natural aspect. The fact that this is registering high to me is an indication that work is being done.
Yeah.
Changes are being made, and therefore it's kicking up a lot of dust. Our organization and culture colleagues in our practice area here at Profit often talk about both the body, mind, and soul, right? That we need to be addressing all 3 of those, not just the functionality of the body and not just the intellectual understanding of the goals, but also the emotional. And I think it's a complicated mix. It's challenging for everyone, but I think that's what's happening here. But I think when we talk about these change challenges, we are engaged in the right conversation. That's what we need to figure out.
Agreed. This is really a function of more is happening, and so we're running into more obstacles, and so that's encouraging to see. One thing that is also encouraging to see, when we did this research when we started in 2014, lack of leadership and clear vision was the top obstacle that most companies faced. And for a lot of time, we've had our analysts write about change agents and really their path to success and some of the obstacles that they're up against and how they have to educate management and executives about the importance of transforming and innovation. looks like this year, the leaders by and large have met that moment and they've got the message and they know what they need to do. So that's really encouraging to see. Again, you can also see there's a slight difference here. Average companies were much more likely to cite lack of clear vision or leadership as a challenge compared to successful companies. So again, this underscores our point about having clear articulated goals. And so what that tells us is that, again, leaders have met the moment, but there's still some work to be done for average companies in terms of articulating vision. And so encouraging to see, however.
Yeah, agreed.
We wanted to get into a few specifics. And again, the whole report goes into a bit more detail about key capabilities. But one of the capabilities we wanted to focus on was the use of data. Again, we've talked about how important this is, how it's a differentiator between successful and average companies. And you can see how big a differentiator it is over here. If you look at that blue bar at the top, that is the majority of successful companies are able to use data in the most mature way, which is that they're able to have digital data analyzed by AI to generate predictive insights and analytics, and they can use that to design real-time customer experiences, maybe generate new customer segments, maybe create next best actions. So they're a lot more comfortable doing that than average companies. The majority of average companies are still using data in maybe what we would call low maturity, which is that they use data to track engagement and reach metrics, but not much else. So there's a big gap that's telling here, and we really believe that the biggest factor between the winners and losers of the next transformation phase is going to be based on who can handle data better. So
Yeah.
we bang people over the heads with data all the time, Chan. What's a way to make this a bit more actionable and a bit more of a real thing to talk about with our clients?
Yeah, so this is an interesting pivot point within digital transformation. For a long time, everybody understood the importance of data ever since the first libraries. And it was really about, the first 20 years was really about creating the means of collection and aggregation of data. And so we spent a lot of money in corporate America and corporate global to get at the data. I think, that generated the expression data haves and data have nots. What I think we're seeing, though, is a transition away from having data to using data. And having data is no longer enough. In fact, having data may not even be a requirement in the sense of possessing data.
Yeah.
Data is now accessible in so many different ways, and that you don't even have to own the data or the means of aggregating the data. What you do with that data has become the new battleground in the data. And AI is like bringing a gun to a sword fight, right? So AI has been used now as a marker of how well you're using data. There are pitfalls to AI. Over-reliance on AI or the AI's capabilities will result in the same kind of disappointment that people have experienced in the last 10 years in over-experience on platform management of, experience platforms, for example, or CRM systems, right? Billions of dollars spent with very sort of mediocre results. So I would say AI is ready for prime time, but is not prime time yet. And people who actually, the companies who develop coherent, usable, intelligent AI strategies and execution definitely have a leg up on the competition.
Agreed. I really like that analogy of bringing a gun to a sword fight. But increasingly, people get scared of AI, and I think there's a lot to be said about AI isn't science fiction anymore. There's some very basic processes that AI is merely augmenting rather than or supporting or taking, giving you time back rather than just wholesale magical things. And of course, it's no good if you don't know what you want to use it for. And I think that's really, really going to be the next part of how companies are going to be successful. How are you going to use it? I'd mentioned before that digital marketing has really improved by leaps and bounds, probably more so than any other function we've seen at companies. So the majority of people can do digital marketing in a pretty mature way. So if you look at that second row there, digital marketing, most companies, the majority of companies can do digital marketing in a highly coordinated, periodic, always on fashion. They can respond in real time to customer interactions. They can use personalized they can use data to create personalized messaging. They can be present on many different digital channels at the same time. What we're seeing the differences in the successful companies is that they're slightly more mature in the way that they show up on many different digital channels. So they're moving away from the traditional channels of web, email, social media, and they're moving into places where that are a bit more conversational or in use, like in store or in product with the rise of IoT or voice systems. So marketing is becoming a bit more organic and a bit more of a digital dialogue rather than a loudspeaker or a banner that's shouting a message at you. And I think that's the key way to think about how marketing is moving.
We know that experience is incredibly important to all of a company's success in the marketplace. We also know that experience has to be managed. It doesn't just, well, if it just happens naturally, it usually happens badly. Having marketing manage most of the customer experiences, to me, I think is clearly more successful because there is a focal point for experience management. Okay, it's not that marketing is inherently better suited for this than other places, but it is the most appropriate place to manage your customer experiences. That cuts across the lead generation or the top of the funnel all the way on down to the sales and product experiences as well. So the companies that are successful that we've seen are where customer experience is managed by the marketing organization with the product and service organization of the company.
That's a great lead into our next chart, which is showing us exactly what that convergence looks like. So in the successful companies, we're seeing far more coordination between marketing, sales, and service. And what that coordination looks like is they're sharing revenue targets, they're sharing customer satisfaction targets, maybe even upsell and cross-sell targets as part of their overall compensation, and they're operating off the same customer journey. And so it used to be that you handle just the awareness part of it, we'll have somebody else handle the point of purchase, and then a whole other team's going to do customer success and resale. But now we're seeing that all those teams have to play together, have to operate off the same customer journey blueprint, and they have to coordinate their efforts about how they're going to go to market and how they're going to have this digital dialogue. So that's a big change from what we've seen in the past. Again, because it's the same customer on the same digital channels, you can't afford to have these siloed departments. You have to kind of put windows between them at the very least. Again, in practice, Chan, how would we talk about this to someone that would be skeptical?
I don't know that there are many skeptics left on this point anymore, Omar. I do think that the main difficulty is in actually executing this. Yeah. So you can agree in principle and everybody will agree. I think most people will agree. But actually doing it is incredibly difficult to both because the frameworks currently don't exist, right? When most companies are sort of managed and accounted for in silos. So that's a difficult thing to do, both, and even in tool sets and data. The other part is the human sort of habit, right? People want to be single focused. And so having all of these disparate sort of data points coming at them could be a little bit, disturbing, a little disruptive. Yeah. And I think that's the transformation, the human transformation that we do need to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've got another report coming out later in the year from one of our analysts at Turpening, which really looks at this point of collaboration and convergence between marketing and sales, especially. And I think the key thing to understand here is that it doesn't mean collaborating on everything. It means identifying the very specific points of collaboration where conflict can occur, or where collaboration needs to be even more. And an example would be content is a point of collaboration, data is a point of collaboration, lead management is a point of collaboration, or lead scoring. Those are places where marketing and sales can really work together rather than wholesale combinations of efforts. And so defining the
Yeah,
scope of really key.
I think one thing that I found is very helpful for companies trying to do this is when they cluster around the data rather than the opinions.
Mhm.
So that we can have empirical, observational, real-time data that says this is successful and that is not. Then you can make decisions on common facts that are accepted. If we run into trouble when people sort of fall back on, well, I've always done it this way, it's always worked for me, therefore we should all do it this way going forward. So I think I would encourage folks when they're engaged in this sort of convergence effort to find the common data that you can use to measure the progress.
Absolutely. So we're going to just do one final slide here about what's next. And so this gives us a few key indicators about what can we expect from the next wave of transformation. So when we ask companies, what are they investing in the next couple of years? What does that look like for you? Top finding, not a surprise, modernizing IT is going to continue happening. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. It's kind of the basis of any sort of modernization effort. But look at number 2, using artificial intelligence or machine learning for predictive analytics, marketing automation, product innovation. This is really key. This shows us that companies, they've got the message, right? They know that AI is going to be mainstream. We don't have to be scared of it. And if we do, we're going to fall behind. We can use it in our existing processes rather than creating wholesale new processes. I think that's really key. When we start teasing out differences, successful companies are slightly more likely to continue focusing on the employee experience, and they're also more likely to focus on data management. So they're being consistent with what they invested in. They're also more likely to accelerate product innovation through formal programs, both internal and external. So there's more of a bent towards innovating, bringing new, not just products, but also thinking of new business models or new processes. Thinking of new ways to work, putting in a few benchmarks around innovation that the successful companies are doing. And then right there at the bottom, this is maybe, I would say, an early sign of successful companies are more likely to invest in external partnerships or ecosystems. So that means that they've done the transformation work internally. And now as part of their innovation programs, they're trying to look outside to see, well, who can we partner with? Is it another app? Is it an app ecosystem? Is it a data ecosystem? Is it just another company that we can partner with for mutual benefit? So an example would be credit card companies partnering with hotels or airlines to create some sort of mutually beneficial products and experiences for customers. We see a lot more of that happening in the next phase of transformation.
Yeah, I think this is really leading us right into some conclusions that we can begin to make about the new state of digital transformation. And that last point around the partnerships and the external sort of ecosystem, I think cannot be emphasized enough. There's been this sort of tradition of enterprises trying to be self-sufficient. And that makes a lot of sense for them to produce. But I think what we're finding is that consumers and customers are looking for answers rather broadly. So if you want to meet the needs of your customers and your employees, for that matter, you need help from friends. I think it's about as humanistic as I can put it. And those companies who are trying to reinvent the wheel for every piece of an experience that they need are going to be delayed. The plug and play aspect, the plug and play mentality of cloud computing has to come to enterprise, right? And that means, that the enterprise transformation has to really take place on every level and in every aspect. So
it's interesting to see that, a lot of companies will come to this and they might want to say, tell us the thing that's new. And a lot of the stuff it isn't new so much as it is just doubling down on the essentials, I think there's a really key learning here about daring to innovate your fundamentals. So what does that look like? And how do you convince companies to take that plunge? I think everybody wants to be innovative, but there's so much to innovate. Your product, your business model, your value proposition, the way you go to market. How do you even wrap your head around that?
Well, I think that we have seen these 5 rules to work best, right? In helping companies transform themselves. And digital transformation is a way of transforming. It's a tool in order to get the company to perform better, right? So what we're seeing is this understanding that digital transformation has to serve a clear business goal. That's not just in order for us to tally up the results at the end, but it's really also to give clarity for people as to why they're doing what they're doing. I think that gives us the ability to triage, to prioritize, and to invest in the right things. And our clients who have done that, right, have reported that decision making is a lot faster and easier, and impact driving comes sooner. Okay? And because they know what the impact is that they want to drive. Okay, and we've talked about the customer and employee experiences. I guess you could call this the human experience has to be prioritized through the digital infrastructure. So, and that takes both art and science. And what we're seeing is an explosion of tracking and designing for experiences. In fact, experience in a digital sphere is increasingly the majority of a customer's or an employee's actual experience with a company. We've sort of crossed the Rubicon on that one. And so I think that's undeniable at this point. And we talked about data. Data is the lifeblood, as we've always said. Now it's time to actually use that data. I want to get to the bottom 2 here, because what we're seeing is that over the last 25 years, we've tried a lot of different things. As we said before, companies have invested trillions into trying different things. And many people say, well, it hasn't worked that well for some and so on. But I would say this, as a global sort of industrial and economic force in the commercial field, I think we've been going to school. We've been paying tuition to learn some things. One of the most important things we've learned is that disparate transformation efforts do not work as well as an integrated effort. It's more complicated, yes. It may take longer, yes, and it may take more money, probably, but it will get better results. And in fact, when you tally it up, what we're seeing is that clients are getting better results sooner. Okay? And that last point here, I think, really speaks to the mindset and the goal of transformation. If you're going to transform, but not really transform, then you're not really going to have success. And we call it daring. We say, we need to dare to innovate our fundamentals, a company's and enterprise fundamentals, rather than on the fringes. Yes, it's more comfortable to have an innovation zone versus a non-innovation zone. But that doesn't transform a company. Innovation is now required. In fact, it's forced us to innovate. The world has changed so radically that we now understand that not only that we have to, but that we can innovate some very, very basics of how a commercial enterprise works. So dare to innovate beyond the fringes, innovate your products, your services, innovate your business model. You don't have to necessarily change your business models, but you can add to your portfolio of business models. If you don't do that, somebody will do it for you. That person may not be in your company. So I think that this innovation zone is now pervasive across the commercial enterprise. We need to be thinking new, thinking innovation everywhere that you look.
I think that's such a great call out, Chan, because there's catching up and just staying current, and then there's being truly innovative, and it's really hard for companies to see the difference between those two, right? So simply moving things to the cloud, adopting, Slack and workplace collaboration tools, those things used to be seen as a fairly modern innovation. Now they're table stakes, and so there's a real difference between companies that are catching up and just doing the basics to keep up with the times, and companies that have fundamentally changed the way they go to market and the way they operate. And those companies have clearly got better results than everybody else, and that's what we want people to think about. So thank you, Chan, for going on this ride with me. We've got a few questions that are coming in. Eileen says, do you believe the notion of digital transformation will not be as relevant as it becomes the way of doing business? How far away are we on the evolution? Do you see any industry sectors being further along this evolution? So let's take out our crystal balls for a minute here. What do you think?
I hope so. On the first question, I think that I hope that digital transformation will be a natural state, not because we have transformed enough, not because we've gotten to where we want to go in transformation, because I just don't think that's possible, but because that'll be a muscle that we've all developed. It'll become part of our natural sort of equipment list, this ability to pivot, this ability to transform, evolve, and change. Digital transformation itself, I do believe, will expire. The name, I think the idea will not. The requirement will not. Okay? And I would say we're at that inflection point. We've had 25 years of exploring and learning. We probably have maybe 5-10 years of doing, after which it'll just be part of our natural sort of way of doing business. Okay. In terms of industry sectors, Omar, I don't know. I think of healthcare and financial services as being both, half or parts of those industries being very, very, very much still stuck in traditional, and justifiably so, but lots of frenetic development in those areas, especially sort of cross-industry payers and providers getting together and so on. So I think of those two sectors as being very far along. I also think of media. Media, if you think about the media dollars and advertising dollars, I think of that as being pretty far along as well.
Absolutely.
Omar, I don't know if you have industries that you're thinking of.
I would agree with you, Chan. I think that's spot on. Another question from Mike Benyo. Who do you see as the greatest beneficiaries of digital experience or digital transformation? Is it marketing, operations, channels? Interesting to think about beneficiaries.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if beneficiaries, Mike, if by that you mean who are the ones that can have the most business benefit from it, I would start with marketing, because marketing touches on so many different constituencies that having digital experience as a core part of the marketing responsibility will accrue benefit to a broader area of the company than others, in my opinion.
Absolutely. If you look at in terms of who's benefited or whose role has been elevated the most, it's clearly marketing. And they've also made the most progress because of digital. It's allowed marketing to do things that are way beyond what marketing was tasked with doing back in the day. So I've got a two-parter here from Marion Widmer, who says, my company is early in data and transformation. What do you think of Tableau as the backbone? We're trying to report on digital attribution effectiveness across multiple business lines for advertising. So I think having Tableau as a backbone in itself, there's nothing wrong with that. I think is in terms of centering your transformation around having a single platform, there's only so much you can do. And so, and certainly having a dashboard that cuts across multiple different functions is always a great thing to have. Having attribution effectiveness is always a great thing to have. But I guess my question back to you is, how far do you want this thing to go? It's really good for the transformation of the way you do digital marketing and digital advertising, but is it transformative for the way you go to market entirely? Well, that's up to you. In that sense, it'll only go as far as you want it to. Would you add
I
anything to
mean,
that?
my thought on Tableau, Omar, I think is that it's a really good way to start creating dashboards and data views in a much more sort of human-friendly fashion. And I think you can use it. It's very versatile. You can use it in a lot of different ways. And so, but I think what you do need is a good Tableau jockey to be able to create the right views.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got maybe, I'm going to just check and see if we've got time for maybe another one. Marian's just got a follow-up comment that she wants to know what's working and what's not since we're spending money. It's a worthwhile investment, Marian. So you rest assured, Tableau will used correctly will pay plenty of dividends. So if there's nothing else, then just a reminder that the report, the complete report, and all the different stats and figures are available to download for free. You can go to profit.com/thinking or profit.com/altimeter, and all you have to do is register with your name and your email address, and you should be able to download the report. Would love your feedback. You can follow us at our Twitter at Profit Strategy at Altimeter Group. Also find us on LinkedIn, where we put out a ton of new content all the time. And thank you again for joining us on this webinar, and thank you, Chan.
Thank you, Omar. It's great research.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.